Here's a big writer downer, okay? In the promissory note, I also mentioned that we can substitute the collateral in the event we cash out prior to the note coming due. Now, the private lender has to approve that, but I do this all the time, substitution of collateral. Let's say I've got a private lender that's got a note on a deal and I cash out that piece of real estate. If I've got another piece of real estate I'm buying or I'm getting ready to rehab and it's got the equity cushion available in it, I will move their note over to a different property. That's why it's called substituting the collateral. How do you do that? Simple. You send your real estate attorney an email that says, I want to substitute the collateral and move XYZ note and collateralize it by this property over there. Then your real estate attorney will draw up what's called a loan modification. Your private lender will sign that, and now you've substituted the collateral. Your private lender is happy because their note stayed in play and they didn't lose out on making any money.
If you're a real estate investor and are wondering how to raise and leverage private money to make more profit on every deal, then you're in the right place. On Raising Private Money, we'll speak with new and seasoned investors to dissect their deals and extract the best tips and strategies to help you get the money, because the money comes first. Now here's your host, Jay Conner.
Wherever you are and wherever you are listening, thank you so much for making us a part of your day. We've got an awesome episode today with Jay Conner. Jay is a proven real estate investment leader and is known as the Private Money Authority. Jay uses his $8 million in private money almost exclusively to buy and sell properties with profits nearing $78,000 per deal. Jay walks his talk and averages 3 deals a month in a small 40,000 population area of Morehead City, North Carolina. Jay has coached over 2,000 real estate investors since 2011, teaching them how to raise private money. This is an incredible episode if you're interested in private money investing or you're interested in real estate. Jay's a wealth of knowledge, and not only that, but he's actually giving away tickets for 2 people for free to his Private Money Academy conference. It's normally $3,000 to attend that. You can get it for only $97 a person and a registration fee. And he's got the event happening in February, June, and October. So pick the one that works best for you. Stay tuned, like and listen, and I know you're going to love this episode. Back to another episode of Winning the Moment. I've got a special guest with me today. This is our first time connecting, which is fun. I love it when that happens. His name is Jay Conner, and he is the Private Money Authority. Jay, thanks for being here with us today.
My lands, Cody, I'm so excited to be here, to be talking about that topic that I'm so passionate about, and that's private money, because private money in our business, in our real estate business, has had more of an impact and a bigger change than anything else we've ever done in our business.
Is it even more so now with the struggles with like the banking institutions and the crazy interest rates? Does that increase your business or decrease your business?
Increased our business. Increased our business. You know, the beautiful thing about private money for real estate is that we make the rules, we sit in the driver's seat, and we're not dictated and, pushed around by the market. In the past 11 months, in the past 22 months, Cody, the feds have raised rates 11 times. And you know what? In that same period of time, the rates that I pay my private lenders haven't changed 1.1 iota. And why is that? That's because we make the rules.
Yeah, I know. It's devastating to see what they've done to interest rates. I mean, it's just like, when I think about, the younger people on my teams that I work with, it's hard to imagine when they're ever going to get themselves a home, because home prices didn't necessarily decrease with the interest rates. They kind of stayed stagnant. But then with those interest rate increases, it makes it really difficult for a young first-time home buyer to get into a house.
Absolutely. Now, I've got some really, really smart friends. One says we're going to see mortgage interest rates down in the 3s by the end of 2024. Another one says they're going to be down in the 4s by the end of 2024. And so that'll make a huge impact on who can afford a house again.
Wow, that's great. I didn't, I know that I'd heard they're going to probably reduce interest rates at least 4 times this year, but I didn't think we'd ever see 3 and 4s again.
Yeah, well, time will tell, because at the end of the day, really nobody has a crystal
Yeah,
ball.
right. No one knows. You had mentioned when we were getting started before we recorded about your book. Do you want to talk a little bit about that really quick?
Oh, sure. So I've been investing in single family houses. We've also done commercial deals, shopping centers, townhouses, condos, primarily single family houses, all the way since 2003. But in 2009, I was cut off from the banks and I had to find a better and quicker way to fund our real estate deals. And so I started using private money. And as a matter of fact, and I'm not talking hard money, I'm not talking institutional money. I'm talking private money, doing business with individuals that are using either their investment capital and or their retirement funds to invest in their deals. And so the first 12 months of using private money all the way back in 2009, our business actually tripled because of all the access to the funding, and that's the same today. So recently, I wrote a book that I'd love to give you for free. So if you're listening to this show, this book is called Where to Get the Money Now. That's the funding for your real estate deals. And that's without, relying on the banks making the rules. And so I'd be glad to autograph, ship this to you in the mail, priority mail. You can pick this book up, very easy to understand, at www.jayconner.com, on an ER, not an OR, jayconner, jayconner.com/book, jayconner.com/book. I'll send it to you, priority mail. It's free. All you do is cover shipping, and we'll ship it right out to you.
That's great. Well, I will put that link in the show notes. So if you're listening to this and you're driving around, know that when you're done driving, or if you're on your computer, just go down to the show notes. I'll have that link right there. It'll take them right to it.
Perfect.
That's wonderful. So why did you get cut off from the banks?
Well, I got cut off from the banks, not because of my credit score. I had an 800 credit score. Not because of my payment record for 6 years. Had a great payment record. I got cut off from the banks because of the global financial crisis that was going on. In fact, Cody, I remember it like it was yesterday. I called up my banker. His name was Steve. We had done a ton of deals in 6 years. I called him up. I told him about these 2 houses I had under contract to purchase, and I knew he was going to fund them. I mean, I've been doing business for, 6 years.
Yeah.
And I learned very quickly that my line of credit had been closed down with no notice. And I said, Steve, why are you shutting me down? We've got a great relationship. He says, well, Jay, the bank is just not loaning money out to real estate investors anymore. I tell you, Cody, and I know you remember it, it was like the spigot turned off overnight. Goldman Sachs, they shut down. I mean, it was a mess. So what did I do? I picked up the phone. I called my friend Jeff Blankenship in Greensboro, North Carolina. I told him what had happened. And I said, what are you going to do? He said, well, first of all, Jay, welcome to the club. The bank just closed my line of credit. I said, what are you going to do? He asked me if I'd ever heard about private money. I told him no. He asked me if I'd ever heard about self-directed IRAs where people can use their retirement funds to loan money out to real estate investors. I told him I never heard about that. So I learned about that very, very quickly. I was able to attract, without asking, begging, chasing, or selling, or trying to talk anybody into anything, I was able to attract $2,150,000 in new funding from individuals. And you know what, Cody? Since that time, I've never missed out on a deal for not having the money. And here's the deal. The traditional way to borrow money is you go to the local bank, or, maybe a hard money lender or whatever. You go to the local bank, you get on your hands and knees, you put your hands underneath your chin, and you say, please fund my deal, right? You're begging. But in this world of private money, we don't ask for a mortgage. We offer a mortgage. What's the difference? Well, you got to own that real estate in between your ears. What do? I put on my teacher hat, my private money teacher hat, and I just started teaching people that I had a relationship with, go to church with them, Rotary Club, Business Networking International. I started teaching them my private lending program. By the way, in the book, that I'll ship to you. The program is in the book exactly as to what I teach potential private lenders. I teach them the program. Don't ask them to fund a deal, but then I call them up with the good news phone call and I say, I got great news. I can now put your money to work. I give them a little overview of the deal, and I don't ask them if they want to fund the deal. Of course they want to fund the deal. They're waiting for the good news phone call. So it's all about teaching. It's all about serving. It's got nothing to do with chasing, selling, or begging.
Well, I know all about having a bank turn you down. I still work in hospitality, and we have a property that we were managing at the time, and we'd worked with this banking institution for 30 years at that point. And we were in the process of doing a big conversion and joining Hilton, and we needed I want to say it's a $10 million loan at the time. And we had all the financials for it, and the bank actually approved it and said, absolutely, we'll fund this for you. We started demolition. We had torn all of the main buildings down to the studs. We demolished a building. And then we were actually flying to China to go get our furniture order. And they had built a replica room in China in a warehouse of our furniture because we wanted to make sure we could get there before the Chinese New Year, so we didn't have time to kind of send it over, do it on site, and then order it. We had to go there directly. And we're sitting in front of the Chinese consulate, getting our visas, waiting to go in, on a phone call with the bank, and the bank says, I'm really sorry, we're not gonna fund your project. And they'd already given us a verbal that they would, and we'd been working with them for 30 years. And so here we are, myself, my business partner, Breck, sitting in this rental car in front of the Chinese consulate. And Breck's like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? You know, like, do we even go to China? And it's like, at this point, we were so leveraged trying to get through this project. And I told him, like, look, we got to go. We'll find another lending institution. And luckily we found a bank that agreed to do it, and we were able to get through it. But we had to go to China and make a handshake deal with our furniture designer, Steve Mittman, because it was about $1 million in furniture we needed to order. And so we had to tell him at the end of it, like, I'm sorry, we don't have any money, but we will, if you're willing to start this for us on a handshake, that we'll take care of it. And luckily he was the kind of guy who believed in us, and we found a solution. But certainly you don't want to be held hostage by the banking institutions if you don't have to be.
Absolutely. When you're making the rules and, you're putting the deal together, then, you don't have to be at the mercy of somebody else that's making the rules. And I mean, for goodness sakes, I'm surprised anything closes traditionally, right? And all the red tape involved. But in this world of private money, the closing documents, 5 pieces of paper.
Wow.
5 pieces of paper. It takes me maybe 3 minutes to sign the paperwork when I close a deal using private money.
Do you work with banks at all anymore, or is it all private money?
All private money.
Wow. So how did you get into real estate? Like, what was that? What was your history into getting into that space?
I was actually raised, Cody, in the mobile home business, also known as the trailer house business, manufactured housing. And so I was raised in that industry because of my father, Wallace Connor. He was the largest retailer of manufactured housing at one time in the nation. And then in 2003, the consumer finance, the money that consumers that were buying mobile homes, they went out of way, fell out of favor with Wall Street.
Why was that?
Why is that?
Yeah.
Because of all the fraudulent business that was going on, manufactured W-2s, people that, of course, doesn't that sound familiar in 2007, 8, and 9, with traditional houses. But you just had so much fraud in the industry. Wall Street says, you know what? We're taking a bloodbath out here. We ain't loaning money out anymore. So I knew if I ever got out of manufactured housing and mobile homes, I knew I wanted to get into single family houses. So that's what I moved over to, single family houses, and then also did commercial.
So were you like a real estate agent then? Is that what you were doing at the time?
Oh, no. Heavens, no.
No.
I went, are you kidding? I went to the realtor training here locally to get my real estate agent's license. And by the second night, they had me scared to death as to the liability I had by walking around with that card in my wallet. And I didn't want to list properties anyway. I wanted to be an investor. So instead.
Okay, so you went into it wanting to be an investor.
Oh, absolutely.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, I mean, the relationships that I have with my realtors and real estate agents are very, very valuable. But I let them do what they do best. They pull my comps. They tell me my values. When I have a property ready to list that they did research on, they're going to get the listing. So I let the realtors do what the realtors do, and I do what I do.
So when you started then, like when you left that mobile home business and went into real estate investing, were you like flipping houses, like finding houses that need improvements and that you could do that and then resell them for a higher price? Or what was your investment strategy in the beginning?
That's how I started out. I just
Flipping.
wanted to flip.
Yeah.
And then as time went on, I learned some other strategies about how I could buy and sell on lease purchase or selling on rent to own, to where the renters were responsible for the repairs instead of me being responsible for repairs. And I would actually help them get in credit repair and help them get ready for a mortgage. And so I've done a ton of those deals as well. But primarily, as far as single family houses go, ever since 2003, most of them have been flips.
Okay. So, and is that still what you're doing today then, is flipping them?
Primarily today in this market. Oh, my lands. It's just unbelievable, the profits. Our average profit right now per deal, per house in our small area of only 40,000 people is $78,000 profit per flip that we're doing. I don't say that to brag, but I do share that to let the message be known. You don't have to be in a large market to make a lot of money, as long as you know how to find the deals and you've got the funding lined up to where you can close quickly without, in fact, I just went under contract yesterday on a house here on Arundel Street in Morehead City, North Carolina. And I had a competitor that offered more money than I did, but I got it under contract because I could close in 7 days. That's a big, you'll get more offers accepted by being able to close quickly with private money. It gives you a great big hedge.
And in most of those deals that you're doing in that Morehead City area then? Do you guys venture out of that at all?
Eastern North Carolina, primarily right here in 2 counties.
Okay. Wow, that's amazing. So, and then are the people, so when you flip it, and then you're listing it, the buyers of those properties, they're using traditional financing, or are you financing the buyers too sometimes?
No. If I list it, then, they're using traditional financing. But I'll tell you, in addition to that, Cody, I've never seen ever so many cash buyers. Listed in the multiple listing service, and they got the cash. So, mortgage rates have gone crazy, in the last year or two. But here in our area, cash buyers, I don't know where they're getting it from, but I'm glad they're bringing it.
We've got a lot of that too. If you don't have cash, you'll have a real hard time getting a home in the area that I live in, unless you're at like, $1 million plus. What's the median house range for the houses that, like when you're making $78,000 a deal, what's the house going for?
$325,000.
Okay. Wow. And what does that usually consist of? Like, is it 1,500 square feet, 3,000 square feet? What's the average house that you guys are doing?
Yeah. Your average house for $325,000 is going to be in that 1,500, 1,600, maybe 1,700 square feet. So the range, you see, we're here on the mainland and we got the beach right across the high-rise bridge. So you got resort properties. You're not going to get anything over there hardly anymore these days for $800,000 or $900,000.
Gotcha.
After repaired value. But here on the mainland, not over on the beach, then, you're going to be talking $325,000, for that, ranch.
Got it. And then, so one thing I was curious about too, looking like getting ready for this podcast with you, is one of the things you said that you could talk to me about was how to buy properties without using your own money. And that certainly sounds interesting to me. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Well, there's lots of ways to buy properties using none of your own money. First of all, let's talk about private money. How in the world do you use private money to not have any of your own money in the deal? And you go along and you grow up hearing people say, well, you can't borrow money without skin in the game. You got to have your own skin in the game. Well, let me tell you what the skin in the game is in this world of private money. The skin in the game is the equity cushion that you're giving the private lender. So let me boil this down for you. Private money. I always bring home a big check when I buy and take none of my own money to the closing table. And they say, Jay, how in the world do you do that? Well, here's the formula. First of all, I don't borrow more than 75% of the after repaired value. I didn't say 75% of the purchase price. I said 75% of the after repaired value. So here's sort of a little checkpoint. If you can't bring home a check from the closing table when you buy and take none of your own money to the table, you shouldn't do the deal. Now I'm talking about a deal that is a rehab. So let's just use some real numbers here. I'm going to use my phone right here to run the numbers. So this deal that I just went under contract on yesterday because I could close quickly. Well, let's run the numbers. The after repaired value is $550,000.
And are you getting that number just from your understanding and expertise of the market? You just know, like, once we do this, once we put the improvements in that this is what it's going to be worth.
I do not rely on my expertise because there could have been a sale on that same street that I didn't know about last week. So I always have comps and a comparable market analysis run by my realtor that I'm doing business with before I make my offer.
Got it.
Right? So I want to know currently what is the after repaired value based on sold comps of houses that are already fixed up, looking absolutely beautiful. So I know this property is $550,000 based off of my realtor's research.
Got it. Okay.
So I got a $550,000 after repaired value. Now, let me just go ahead and run the formula for you as to my maximum offer on this house. So when you're paying cash with private money, you cannot let your emotions dictate what you're going to offer. The math always makes the offer.
Yeah,
the
that makes
math
sense.
dictates that. So I'm buying it for $550. Excuse me. The after repaired value is $550. I'm buying it for $325,000. Okay, that's my purchase price, $325,000. The repairs, estimated repairs on this house are $70,000. Okay, so watch how I'm going to bring home a big check when I buy this property.
So you're going to invest in total $395,000.
Correct, not including carrying costs and closing costs, but yeah, on the big picture.
Yeah,
so $550,000. So that's the after repaired value. So if I know that I can borrow up to 75% of the after repaired value, there it is right there, $412,500. That's the check that I'm going to bring home from the closing table. So that's not the check, excuse me. That's the most I'm going to borrow.
Got it.
So I'm borrowing $412,000.
And so you've got that cushion there because you've got, about $17,500 of cushion if you needed it.
Exactly. So I'm borrowing $412,500 on this property. The seller is going to get $325,000. So I'm bringing home a check of $87,500 from the closing table that I'm taking and putting in my company account. And as you just said, Cody, I've got a little cushion there over and beyond $17,000, over and beyond what the rehab is budgeted to be. So again, there's my check and balance. If I can't bring home this big check, then I shouldn't do the deal. Now, let's be totally transparent and make sure everybody's understanding what I'm saying. This formula is not going to work unless you're buying at a discount, paying all cash, right?
Yeah.
Now let's contrast private money to say buying creatively, subject to the existing note, right? Well, if I'm buying subject to the existing note, which means the seller of that house is agreeing for you, the buyer, to make their payments for them. You're not assuming the loan. You're just agreeing to make their payments. They're giving you ownership. Well, my lands, how is that a no down payment purchase? Well, in that example, you're actually leveraging the current mortgage that is in place And down payment, you don't have to bring any down payment to the table unless the seller is requiring more than what is owed on the property. So if you are buying for more than what is owed on the property, then that money you'd have to bring to the closing table will go to the seller. However, you can use private money in second position and still buy creatively with seller financing or subject to the existing note and use your private money instead of pulling any cash out of your pocket.
So let's go back to this one deal really quick. So you've got after improvement value of $550, you bought for $325, anticipating about $70,000 in rehab, which is $395. You're pulling out $412,500, so you've got about $87,000 at closing, $17,000 buffer-ish on your improvement cost. So if you sell the house for the $550, now of course this is not figuring interest, closing costs, any of that, but you're at about $137,500 in profit on that deal, assuming all things work out, right?
Yeah. So let's run that just to double check. So I'm selling it for $550, and I spent $70,000 on repairs, and that's if Murphy doesn't show up, right? And Murphy always shows up, right? And I paid $325 for it, right?
Yeah.
So now I'm down to $155. Now my realtor fee that I pay is 5%.
Okay.
So run that real quick for me, Cody. What's 5% of of 550? It's gonna be $27,000.
$27,500. Right? Yeah. So if you take
minus that $27,500,
then you're at $110.
So I'm down to $127,500. Well, what's got to come out of that? Carrying cost, private lender interest, utility bill, insurance, taxes, cutting the grass, right?
Yeah.
So all that over a 6-month period. Well, I pay 8%. So that's per year to my private lender. So 8% of 325 is like 25,000, but I'm only using it for 6 months. So my interest to my lender is going to be like $12,000. So let's double it. Let's say the carrying cost was even $20,000, which it's not going to be. I'm still profiting over $100,000 on this example.
And so in that example, so you didn't use your money because you got private investors that have a pool of funds, and you use those funds to execute this deal. And then what those investors are getting out of it is an 8% return.
That's it.
And so they don't care how much you make on the house. They're not sharing in that. They're only just getting the 8%.
Correct. I don't do any private equity. I don't do any joint venture. I pay my private lenders. I got 47 private lenders right now from all over that are loaning money on our deals, and they're getting a straight 8% based on the time they've got the money loaned out.
Okay, and is there a reason that none of those private investors want to work with you in any other capacity? Is it just because you don't offer it?
Well, first of all, I don't offer it. I've only had one private lender all the way since 2009 that called me up. He says, Jay, I'm loving the private lending program. I've enjoyed it, but I don't want to do business with you like that anymore. I want to get part of the action. I want to get part of the profit. I want to share in the profits. And I said, man, I appreciate you bringing up this conversation, but here's the deal. First of all, too many cooks in the kitchen burns the toast. I do what I do best. My private lenders do what they do best, which is lay in bed, sleep at night, and make money. So I said to my private lender, if you want to share in the profits, then you need to go out and do your own deals. You need to find your own deals. You need to negotiate your own deals. You need to oversee contractors. You need to deal with the problems that come up with repairs. And you just need to go be a real estate investor if that's what you want to do. What do you think he did? He said, okay, I'll be a private lender.
Okay, so then what is, you said you have 45 lenders, private lenders out
47,
there? 47. So what's the minimum investment someone can make to be in that program?
$50,000.
$50,000, okay. And then is there amount of time that they have to leave that money in there?
Well, that's a great question. So the amount of time they leave the money in it is for the length of time that the deal needs it. But what's in the promissory note? So the length of the note is 2 years, but we can cash out early with no penalty. And so typically on a flip, we're going to cash out these days within that 6 to 9 month period, depending on the, scope of the flip and the repairs. But as an incentive to my private lenders to do business with us, I give them a minimum of a 6-month return. So you see, I'm paying 8% a year, right?
Yeah.
But if I don't use the money for the entire year, how am I taking care of them? Well, there's a couple of different ways. First of all, I give them a minimum of 6 months. So let's say in the unlikely event, I did a flip in 3 or 4 months. I'm still going to pay them 6 months worth of interest. So if I'm paying them 6 months worth of interest, they didn't make 8%. They made 4% on their loan amount because they were only I was only using it for half a year. However, here's a big rider downer, okay? In the promissory note, I also mentioned that we can substitute the collateral in the event we cash out prior to the note coming due. Now, the private lender has to approve that, but I do this all the time, substitution of collateral. Let's say I've got a private lender that's got a note on a deal and I cash out that piece of real estate. If I've got another piece of real estate I'm buying or I'm getting ready to rehab and it's got the equity cushion available in it, I will move their note over to a different property. That's why it's called substituting the collateral. How do you do that? Simple. You send your real estate attorney an email that says, I want to substitute the collateral and move XYZ note and collateralize it by this property over there. Then your real estate attorney will draw up what's called a loan modification. Your private lender will sign that, and now you substitute the collateral. Your private lender is happy because their note stayed in play and they didn't lose out on making any money.
Have you seen because right now with the interest rates, banks out there are offering like insane interest rates, right? Like, so you can put your money in Ally with no penalty to withdraw, and they'll give you like 5% on your money just for putting it in the bank. So has that impacted your ability to get private lenders at all? Or are you also putting those unused funds in an account like that?
Yeah, because 8% is still a lot better than 5%, right?
Right, but if they, let's say in that example you gave was only 6 months and they're getting 4%, right? Then they could have had zero risk and gotten a % higher return.
Well, they're still getting 8% annual percentage rate.
Okay, got it. And how do you decide
8% on an annual basis?
How do you decide when you've got your pool of 47 investors? How do you decide whose money you're using for what deal, or is your goal to be executing all of the money at all times?
That's a great question, because when you use private money, and I'm speaking to your audience, when you use private money the way I do, you're going to have a problem. It's a good problem. You're going to have more money than you can use.
Yeah, I'd imagine.
So how do you keep them happy? Well, here's my business practice. First of all, when I have a new private lender come on, they go to the top of the list.
Got it.
Because I want to make sure they know that I can perform and I can put their money to work for them. In fact, what I've done, Cody, sometimes is when I have a new private lender, if I don't have another deal like within the next few weeks that I'm closing on, like in the next 2 or 3 weeks, I will take the new private lender money and cash out a private lender I've already got on another property. And I'll move that money from the private lender that was already invested in the property over here to be available for the next property that comes along. So new private money, you want to use that, ASAP. Secondly, it's real simple. It's called going back in the queue. Going back in the queue. So when we pay off a private lender or we're cashing out on a deal and there's not another property to collateralize that note, we will cash them out. By the way, you cannot keep the money. You cannot keep the money, right? So we cash them out. We tell them we'll put their funds back to work just as soon as possible. And so then they go into the queue. And of course, we use larger amounts of money because our private lenders have different amounts of money that they can invest.
Yeah, the lowest is 50,000. What's the highest you'll take?
There's no limit.
No limit. Okay.
I mean, the highest would be, what kind of property am I buying?
Yeah.
I mean, the highest property I've done is with an after repaired value of $900,000.
Okay.
Obviously, I'm not going to borrow $900,000 on an after repaired value of $900,000. So when the money comes available and we've cashed it out on a deal, It goes in the queue, and obviously the larger amounts of money that a private lender has, we're going to use for purchase of properties. But the smaller amounts of money, we will use in junior positions for rehab money.
Okay. And they're all getting their 8% return, whether it's used on the purchase or the
In
rehab.
first position. Second
Oh, okay,
position,
gotcha.
I pay them 10% because they're in a junior position. They're at a higher risk.
Okay.
So 8% first position, 10% in a junior.
Is that because in the junior position, their money's going towards the rehab, which doesn't have the collateral value that the first position has with the house?
And in addition to that, if the second position had to foreclose on me and I didn't pay, for them to be made whole, they now inherit the senior position loan.
Got it. Okay, so you can get up to 10%. So do some people prefer to be in second position even though it's more risky because the return's better?
No.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Well, and the thing of it is, I'm not going to put 100,000 or whatever, larger amounts of money in a second position because I'm using that money for purchase.
Yeah.
Right. So, but it took some training. It's like, some of my lenders will start out at 10% because they're using smaller amounts of money. And then their money grows over time because of the returns that we're paying. And then I have to tell them, I say, well, you're up to a larger amount of money, so now you get 8%.
Yeah. And then, so another question that kind of just leads into what you've explained here is one other topic that you have is how you can get 3 big checks with every real estate deal. So you've probably touched on it a little bit, but just clarify that maybe for the listeners.
Sure. So how do you get multiple checks? I mean, who else wants to get paid to buy properties, right? So multiple checks on every transaction. First of all, you're going to get your first big check when you buy. When you buy a property, you bring home a big check when you're using private money without taking any of your own money to the closing table. If that doesn't make sense, it's right here in the book.
Well, and would that first check be the $87,000 in that?
Exactly. And how is that? Because you're borrowing more than you need to buy.
Yeah.
Right. It's that simple. Now, when do you get another check? Well, if you're just cashing out and flipping and cashing out, you get another big check when you sell, obviously. And by the way, all the interest that we pay is interest only. And you know what? When you're doing a flip, you can just let the interest accrue. You don't have to make monthly payments to the private lender unless they're like needing payments to live off of. You can just let the interest accrue and cash out, when you finish that flip. So you're going to get another big check when you cash out. And that is the difference between what you sell the property for and what you still owe the private lender, right? So the big check when you sell. In the middle of that transaction, which I've done a lot of, if you sell on rent to own or lease purchase and you're still owning the property, well, you're going to get another check in the middle of the deal by receiving a large non-refundable lease option deposit. The legal term is actually an option fee that would be applied to their purchase price. So you can get a big check when you buy. If you sell on rent to own, you can get a large non-refundable option fee. And then when you cash out, you can get a third check.
And when you're doing these deals, do most of your investors prefer to just wait and let the interest accrue, I'd imagine?
It's half and half. We've got some elderly private lenders that actually are living off of the monthly interest.
Got it.
Right? In fact, we've received thank you notes from our private lenders about how we have changed their retirement years because of us paying the 8% interest. So, instead of having their money in the stock market or, in the local bank in a CD, they've got it with us. So I let the private lender determine how often they want to get payments.
Well, and if your money's in the stocks,
to live off of, I'm sorry.
If your money's in stocks, you don't really want to be drawing out because if you're drawing out at the wrong time, that can have a compound effect on you, right? And so,
absolutely,
this is a more secure way of doing it.
Absolutely.
How many deals on average are you guys doing a year?
So right now we're doing about 25 deals a year, and that's been the average since 2009. We do 2 to 3 a month. Average profits, as I said, right now are $78,000 per deal.
And to be a private lender, I'd imagine this is in your book, but to be a private lender, are there any like regulations or certifications or licensing that you have to be a private lender?
Don't need any special licensing or certifications to borrow private money or to be a private lender. And here's why. Private money is not regulated by the commissioner of banks in your local state. In fact, I got private lenders in 10 different states. And so we are not an institution, and the private lenders are individuals. They're not regulated by the commissioner of banks. So it's simply a one-on-one transaction between the private lender and the operator or the real estate investor.
Of your 47 investors that you have, do you know all of them personally, or how did you grow that client base that you have?
Yeah, so I started with everybody me knowing personally, either going to church together, in my cell phone, at Business Networking International, at the Rotary Club, Chamber of Commerce. We knew each other with some kind of connection. But quickly, private lenders can't keep their mouth shut. They tell their family and friends about these high rates of return they're getting. So quickly, here come the referrals of other people that I did not know that my current private lenders are referring to me. So all of my private lenders, I either knew or I have been introduced to them by a current private lender.
And what's your longest tenured client who's had money with you for the longest amount of time, and how long is that?
All the way back to 2009.
They've kept it with you all that time.
Yep.
Wow, that's amazing. So you kind of alluded to this, but one of the next questions is, how can you fund your deals with self-directed retirement accounts? And I imagine that's what you were talking about there with those retired people. So want to elaborate a little bit more on that for the listeners?
Absolutely. Well, here's a writer downer. If you, as a real estate investor, want to attract a lot of private money in your world, you need to establish a relationship with a IRS approved, it's called a third party custodian, also known as a self-directed IRA company. Establish a relationship with them because here's why. First of all, over half of my private lenders, of those 47 people, are using their retirement funds to loan us money on our deals. And if I hadn't had a relationship with a self-directed IRA company to refer a new private lender that I have that's got retirement funds over to the self-directed IRA company, I'd be missing out on over half of my funding. So here's the way it works. A self-directed IRA company is IRS approved to be a third-party custodian, to simply be the manager of those funds. Now, a self-directed IRA company cannot give any financial advice. It allows a person with retirement funds, it's either in a pension, a former employer, or currently a 401k, if they allow you to move part of it out. Maybe you got retirement funds in the stock market. You can transfer those funds tax-free and penalty-free, no tax effect, over to the self-directed IRA company. It takes a couple of weeks to get the account funded. And now you as the private lender are able to use your retirement funds. And now you can earn unlimited money, listen to this, per year, either tax deferred or tax free, depending on the type of retirement account you've got. I don't know another vehicle or way that people can make unlimited money per year, tax deferred or tax free, than using a self-directed IRA.
Is that because the profits are going back into the IRA, so they're able to earn without a tax burden, and then when they withdraw, they could potentially have taxes depending on which kind of fund they set up?
Correct.
Got it. Wow, that's awesome. And you said more than half of your investors are using that now.
That's right.
Are they in retirement age?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They're in retirement age if they're using their retirement funds. And you bring up a good point there, Cody. It's just not retirement funds that private lenders use. I mean, it's just liquid investment capital. We've got a lot of private lenders that are doing both. They're using their investment capital and they're using retirement funds that they've moved over to the self-directed IRA company that we recommend. So they're doing both investment capital that they've got, just liquid investment capital, and retirement funds.
Okay. And so I feel like you've given a lot of this already, but what are your favorite reasons to use private money?
Woo! That's a long list. So here we go. I'll do So why use private money? What are my favorite reasons? Well, number one, you make the rules. You're not going to the bank or the hard money lender and, begging, pleading, selling, persuading. It's the opposite of that. What are you doing? You're putting on your private lender teacher hat and you are teaching the program. Now, the program is all here in the book laid out for you to teach potential private lenders. So number one, I love it because you make the rules. I mean, who would not want to make the rules in your business? Number two, I receive multiple checks on every deal, which I just explained. Talk about fixing your cash flow when you don't have to bring money to the closing table, right? Pick up a check when you buy. So fixes your cash flow. Another one, credit check. Your credit's got absolutely nothing to do with how much private money you can get. Why is that? Because private money is a collateral loan. The private lender is not loaning you the money because of your credit score or your verification of income. Your verification of income has got nothing to do with how much private money you can get. In addition to that, closing quickly. I get more deals, more offers accepted because I can close quickly using private money. If you're using institutional money, it's going to take you weeks before you can close, and time kills deals. In addition to that, private money, if you've never done a real estate deal before, private money is your fastest way to get your first deal. Why is that? Because the majority of the deals out there require all the cash. And if you don't have the cash, you're going to be missing out. I've reviewed thousands of property lead sheets from sellers over the years. My statistics show only 13% of for sale by owners, off-market houses, will sell to you creatively. What do the other 87% require? All the cash. So when you got the private money, talk about building your confidence. Talk about, I tell you, Cody, I never bought a property I didn't make an offer on, stop and think about it. And so when you've got the private money lined up, by the way, get the private money lined up. The money comes first. When you got the private money lined up, think about how many more offers and how much more confident you're going to be in making the offers, knowing that you can close quickly.
Yeah, of course. It's completely different. I know that people are losing houses left and right if they don't have money for themselves and they're going up against people who have cash. They're always going to take the cash offer.
Now, some of your audience, I'm sure, Cody, may be wholesalers. And if you're a wholesaler, you may be thinking, I don't need private money. You're right. If you're just going to wholesale a deal and get an assignment fee, you don't need any private money. But here's what I know. I know wholesalers, when they get into doing some deals, there's going to be a deal that comes across very, very quickly where you go, man, if I had the money to take this down, I'd stay in this deal. Because, which would you rather have? $78,000 profit or a $12,000 assignment fee, right? So private money is the answer to wholesalers who want to pick and choose the deals that they want to stay in.
I love that. So I've got a couple questions I want to ask you that I go through that aren't related necessarily to your private lending business. Is there anything else that you want to share with the listeners before we pivot to some of those other questions?
Oh, my lands. There's a ton I want to share, but I know we're out of time. So get the book, jconner.com/book.
Okay. So the first question I have for you, I find that when people who are thriving and really accomplishing their goals and making headway in whatever space they want to make headway in, I find that they usually have a pretty defined purpose. So I'm curious, what's your purpose?
Yeah, that's a great question, Cody. That reminds me of a conversation that I had with a good friend of mine not too long ago. We were riding down the road and he said, Jay, when is enough enough? And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you don't have to be doing all this work that you're doing. You've made millions of dollars a year. You're traveling all around the country, training and, coaching other real estate investors. When is enough enough? And I said, man, that's a great question. Here's the answer. Enough is never enough when it's not about you. When it's not about you. Any venture that I've gotten involved in ever since I was in my 20s, if the only purpose and the only reason I was in it was to make money, You know what, Cody? I never got off the ground.
Yeah,
Right?
I believe it.
So what is my purpose today? Why am I still doing what I'm doing? I have reached a level in my life as to what I call significance. Significance. So one of my favorite books is called The Go-Giver. I'm sure you've heard of it, Cody. The Go-Giver. And it's a great book that talks about identifying your purpose and leading with a servant's heart. So that's a long answer or question. To give you the answer, what is my purpose? My purpose is to make an impact. How do I make an impact? The biggest way I make an impact right now, even though I'm still doing a ton of deals, my purpose is to make an impact and a difference in other real estate investors' lives and worlds and financial situation, and share the knowledge I have learned about private money, because I know what private money has done for me and my wife, Carol Joy, and our entire team.
I love that. That's funny too, because one of my questions was going to be, what's your favorite book besides yours? And so you killed two birds with one stone, giving us the Go-Giver. So that's great. Now, I don't think you've not read my book, Winning the Moment, have you?
No, but I want it.
So one of the questions I like to ask is, what's the biggest win you've ever had in your life? And I really leave the definition of winning up to you. So don't feel like you've got to follow society's definition there. But with that being said, what's the biggest win that you've ever had?
I can tell you my biggest win, in addition to being a Christian and having Jesus Christ as my Savior. In addition to that, the biggest win is my wife, Carol Joy.
I knew you were going to say that.
I met Carol Joy, and look, I'm not saying that so she can hear it. She ain't even here. And the odds of her even hearing this podcast are slim to none, and Slim just got up and left.
Yeah.
Right? But Carol Joy is my biggest win. How is that? Well, we met in church my very first Sunday in Wichita Falls, Texas, when I moved out there years ago. And she's my mainstay. We've got the same core values. We were raised in the same type of church. We're both Christians. And I mean, the list is long as to why she's my biggest win, but I'll just leave it at that.
And how long have you guys been together?
37. We've been together 39 years. We've been dating 39 years. We just happen to have been married 37 of the 39.
That's amazing. Any keys to that? Like, if you were to say, like, what are a few things that allowed you guys to have the success, what would you say?
Yes. Number one, have the same spiritual foundation. If you don't have the same spiritual or the same foundation whatsoever with your mate, it ain't going to last.
Yeah.
Right. So same foundation. And number two nugget is put them first. Put your other mate, your spouse, your significant other, you put them first and look after their interests first. You're not going to have to worry about yourself.
I love that. So then the opposite of that question is, what's the biggest loss you've ever experienced?
In real estate, it was buying a property that I did not calculate the buy and hold math. I bought this property back in 2005 over on the beach. I ran the numbers for a flip. I didn't run the numbers as if the market was going to turn down and I was stuck and I had to hold it. So that property was a bloodbath, because I did not also run the numbers on will renting it out cover the underlying debt. So always run math both ways. Flip if you're flipping, but also run the math on buy and hold.
Can you share?
I'm talking houses.
What was your loss on that? Can you share that?
Over 100,000.
Ouch. Yeah, that hurts. Takes two deals to make up for that one.
That's 1.5.
Yeah. So then I'm curious, obviously you're a mentor to people now. Pretty clear you've helped over 2,000 real estate investors with their businesses. But did you have a mentor that made a big impact in your life?
Absolutely. Ron LeGrand in Jacksonville, Florida. I went to Ron LeGrand's my first boot camp to Ron LeGrand was in 2007. He was having a boot camp in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And we're still very, very close today.
That's awesome. Is that some of your inspiration to help all the people you've helped with their businesses?
Absolutely. I mean, after I've been to some of Ron's events, I thought to myself, I said, you know what? He's making an impact on thousands and thousands of people. I said, you know what? When I learn enough and I know what I'm doing and I've made enough terrible mistakes that I can share with other people. I said, I want to be a coach and a mentor and a trainer as well. And so Ron LeGrand, he was my inspiration to be a real estate investing coach.
And what does that coaching look like? How do people go through that with you? Is it just seminars, or is it one-on-one coaching? Like, how do you structure that, and what's the fee structure for that?
Yeah, all the above. We have one-on-one coaching, we have online coaching, we have group coaching, and we have live events. And I hadn't planned on doing this, Cody, but I just guess I will. I don't know why. Maybe it's a message from above. But anyway, I have a live event that I do only 3 times a year. It's called the Private Money Academy Conference. It's in person here in Eastern North Carolina. And it's a $3,000 event, which gets two tickets. But for your listeners, Cody, I'm going to give out a URL where they can come for free. Two people with only a $97 registration fee, and that's just to hold people's seat because it always sells out.
Of course.
But here's a special URL for your listeners, and that is www.jaysliveevent.com, JAYS live, LIVE, event.com. And that'll give your listeners free access.
That's incredible. That's awesome. What a huge value add. That's very exciting. We'll be sure, of course, to put that in the show notes for you too, for the people who are listening and not in front of a computer. Go do that. Obviously, that's a huge value, $3,000 value to get out there. And so, if you're interested, no better way to get it than from the horse's mouth, live and in person. So I think that's incredible. So thank you for that, Jay. Last question I have for you. This one I deem the most important. It's one that I really see the younger audience struggle with. So I'm curious how you perceive this, but how do you define success?
I define success, first of all, as not a destination. So if someone is thinking that, when I get this, or when I get that, or when I acquire this, or I can do that, or I can take off any time that I want. Did you hear that word I that was repeated in that?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So when it's all about the I, that negates the success, because first of all, if you're looking for material things to give you happiness, you might as well stop right now, because material things are not going to give you success. They're not going to give you happiness. So, it's a cliche. Success is a journey. Now, success in one definition is, okay, what am I successful at? Well, you can be successful at achieving any goal. But when someone asks the question, what's your definition of success? What's really being asked, in my opinion, is what's your definition of happiness and joy?
Yeah.
So that's really all we want.
Yeah.
That's all we want in life. We don't want success. That's so vague. What we want is joy and happiness. And I can tell you the definition of joy and happiness. The definition of joy and happiness is being able to do what you want to do, when you want to do it, with whom you want to do it, and for how long you want to do it, because you can make an impact and a difference in other people's lives. That's it.
I absolutely love that. I even have in my book, Stop Looking for All Be Happy Win Moments, because when you predicate your happiness on a future event, then you're failing to be present. And the only thing that's real and the only thing that matters is right now. So you better have your goals based on what you're actually living versus where you've been in the past or where you think you're headed in the future.
That's so true, Cody. And I can't wait to read your book. I was riding down the road with another friend many years ago. Very successful. He had all the toys. He said, he had the airplane, he had the boat, he had the jet skis, he had the weekends off, and bless his heart, he was totally frustrated. We were riding down the road and he says, Jay, isn't there something else? And I said, yeah, there really is something else. And then we had the conversation of what you and I are now having.
Yeah, I've had that same conversation with some of my really on paper successful friends who have all the things you just mentioned, and none of that matters, right? And
Right.
so I think that's a really important point and a great way to end today's podcast. I do want to kick it over to you, though. Is there anything else you want to share with the audience before we say our goodbyes?
Yeah, stop thinking about what you want to do and do it.
I love it. What a great way to end. Are you on Instagram, Jay?
Say what?
Are you on Instagram?
I am, but there's not much activity.
Okay,
on
so
Instagram.
the jayconnor.com is the best place for people to connect with you then. Would that be right?
jayconnor.com. That's
Okay.
my main website, jayconnor.com. Go there. Also, get my book. When you order my book, that's the beginning of coming into my world. So order the book, jayconnor.com/book, and we will get to know each other.
Well, and then also go to jaysliveevent.com and get yourself a ticket for two to go to the Private Money Academy conference.
And we will hang out together nonstop for 3 days.
When is that conference, Jay? Do you have the dates for it?
Sure. So right here in 2024, the next one is February 14, 15, and 16. February 14, 15, and 16. And so if you're listening to this before that date, you definitely want to take advantage of that. The next one is going to be in June. By the way, all these are here in Eastern North Carolina. The next one is here in June, and the dates for that are June. Let me pull it up here. June. Well, I thought I had it here. Bear with me a second. Yeah, here it is. June 12, 13, and 14. June 12, 13, and 14. And then the next one here towards the end of the year is going to be in October, and that's October 23, 24, and 25.
Okay, well, that is awesome. Jay, it's been a real pleasure, just a wealth of knowledge, all topics that I was not familiar with, so that was super fun. I am sure the audience loved it, and maybe we will get some new private money investors out of this. So thank you so much for the time, and have a happy new year.
Cody, thank you so much. God bless you.
Are you feeling inspired by the knowledge you gained in this episode? Then head over to jayconnor.com/moneyguide. That's jayconner.com/moneyguide and download your free guide that shares 7 reasons why private money will skyrocket your real estate investing business right now. Again, that's jayconnor.com/moneyguide to get your free guide. We'll see you next time on Raising Private Money with Jay Conner.